Hey, hello. Anya Ray here, head coach at Quill Cup, a sisterhood of women writers who can't help but write and make sure to show up to the page. I am very excited to share one of our prickles with you. A prickle is what we call one of our writing sessions. So if you think of a quill, you might think of a hedgehog, and a group of hedgehogs is called a prickle. I know, super cute. I was able to coach our writers at this particular prickle, and we were comparing how we could use what we know about cognitive behavioral therapy and apply them to the backstories of a character. And so I'm very excited to share that lesson with you. Enjoy. Week we were talking about how we could apply psychology, especially cognitive behavioral therapy, to character and plot development. And we said, okay, so if we have these triggers that happen in our lives, then they trigger an automatic thought, and that we decided that this automatic thought is not who we are, but it reveals something about us and what we have experienced in life, which then could, if we act on that thought right away, that is a reaction. But if we reframe it, then it's a response, right? Then it's our behavior as a response. And then how we behave ultimately has a say in our life circumstances, which then leads to another life event, which leads to automatic thoughts. And then we have this cycle, right? And so you may have seen me post a week or so ago that a perfect story shouldn't be our aim. Instead, if we write characters true to human nature, then we have written at least a true story that then we can revise into, as close to a perfect story as possible. But if we're only focused on writing this perfect story, then we're going to be faced with perfectionism, and that brings up anxiety, which brings up that stupid writer's block, right? So if we're going to cure writer's block, that means that we're not writing for this perfect novel. Instead, we want to write a true story, even if it's totally made up. And so if we want to do this, that means that we need to know our character's past very intimately. And something that got me thinking about this is actually Kim. She wrote basically her character's past, and she was like, I thought this was the story, but then it wasn't the story. And at some point, I'm sure there was like a grieving process that she was like, dang, this isn't going to be in my like actual story. However, it is part of the story, and actually I would bet that her story now is going to be way stronger because she knows the back stories of her characters like so well, so intimately. And even if like paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of that original backstory won't be in her current novel, we will be able to see like the echoes of that first draft. Okay, so here is what I want to say about that. The first draft is for you. The reason why the first draft is so hard and so messy is because we're just telling the stories to ourselves. We've never met these characters before. How are we supposed to make them eloquent and beautiful, right? And so what's going to happen inevitably is that you're going to have 1, 2, 10 paragraphs that are only narrative. They're like straight telling the story because you don't know the story. And that's totally okay. That doesn't mean that you're a terrible writer, that you're not a seasoned one, that you're not a vet one. I am going to write a telling draft for the first draft of my 3rd book because I don't know the story yet. And I could pre-think and outline and everything else, but there are still going to be narrative sections in that draft. That's okay. Think about how you meet someone though, right? Like if you were to hear someone's life story all at once, not only would it be kind of overwhelming, you'd be like, whoa, I just met you. You could also feel a little put off by the introduction, right? You meet someone a little at a time based on how much time you spend with them in different situations, right? Like, do they, well, I'll tell you, I learned a lot about my husband when we were first dating on our first date. I thought he was ordering a hot dog for me. Like, he's like, 2 hot dogs, please. And I was like, no, it's okay. I already ordered. And he's like, no, they're for me. And so, like, I learned a lot about Cody, who orders these 2 hot dogs for himself. I'm like, that is a man who advocates for his needs, right? So I like over time learned like, oh, he doesn't take his hot peppers and put them to the side. He likes spicy things, right? Like over time we meet somebody, and that's how we need to meet our characters too. So the second drafts are really hard because you need to have a balance between how much you make your reader work for the information and how much information you're going to give the characters. So not next week, but the week after, I'll be doing another prickle about direct and indirect characterization that touches on this very thing. Okay, but hold on, where do I want to go? Okay, yeah, that's strange. Oh yeah, no, I'm right. Okay. So if you think of this like chart over here, we're gonna go from the top to the bottom, okay? So if on the left side you have the writer, and you're gonna have this arrow that's going all the way to the reader. That means that, I mean, pretend that this arrow is like a spoon. I'm essentially spoon feeding the reader this information by saying Lily was fashionably late, okay? That doesn't leave any room for imagination. You are telling us that Lily was late, okay? However, here, if we love our language, right? We're writers, we love words. But what if our words get a little away from us and we say something like, Lily's decision to arrive was often dictated by society's notion of tardy or on time. Okay, that's really messy. The reader's gonna have to stop and be like, whoa, 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 what? And she's gonna have to sit with that sentence until she like figures it out. And you might be like, I am writing highbrow literature, but really what's happening is you're making your reader work too hard for something that they should be forgetting that they're reading. Okay, so like our goal to write the most captivating novel possible is, as you're reading your scene, you should forget that you're reading, because that's going to be the same effect that it has on your reader. So if you look here where it kind of looks like there's a war going on, so the writer and the reader have to do equal amounts of work. Or if you have the writer give like a little bit more information so the reader doesn't have to work quite as hard, or the writer gives a little less information so that the reader has to do a little bit more work, whatever. As long as you don't have either option 1 or option 2, option 3 is ideal. Okay, so at this point you might be like, what are you talking about? So let me illustrate this with actual words. Okay, this is from my first novel, The Cromwell Rules. She was sure he had already been seated. The gold watch hanging loosely around her left wrist revealed it was now 20 minutes past their scheduled time. Though Anne thought it too long to keep a man of high standing waiting, Lily had devised this rule herself when she was a sophomore in college. The unwritten rule was that if a professor didn't show up within 15 minutes of class time, students were allowed to leave. But there was one professor, Dr. Natasha Sterling, who was so captivating, so engaging, and so entertaining that everyone waited for her every time. So now she Dr. Sterlinged all her suitors. Marley was a fan of this method, and it hadn't failed Lily yet. So let's talk about this. The life event is that Lily has arrived at a restaurant, presumably for this date, okay? The automatic thought is the place for the backstory. This is where we get to kind of slip in some backstory. So Lily wants to have the same effect as Dr. Sterling did, which means she respects her professor, which if I hadn't said when she was a sophomore in college, this line would be enough to tell the readers that she's presumably college educated too. So ultimately, what this line reveals, or what this section reveals, is that it matters to Lily how people perceive her, and she's going to assume that she is now Dr. Sterling enough that even this guy she just met and is like going on to meet for this date with, that he's going to wait 20 minutes. And honestly, like if she has this standard, this means that anyone who doesn't wait the 20 minutes, I think she's the kind of character who would be like, all right, you're lost. Like, I'll wait for the guy who waits the 20 minutes for me, right? And so the behavior is like, she's obviously not in a rush. You know, it hadn't failed Lily yet. And then the life circumstance is that it presumably won't fail her this time either, but it also could. And this is, I think, where we get our idea of plot twist. Like, what if he wasn't there? And what if she really did like him? All of a sudden, her rules aren't working out for her, right? So this is just like a breakdown of how it could work in your story. Okay, it's very, very short, but it's layered and it's relevant to this scene. So the revisions are definitely for your readers. Here's just like a quick checklist. You want to give your readers bits and pieces as you go. You're going to layer the information in, but make sure that the layered backstory information is relevant to the scene. So as long as your automatic thoughts are linked to the life event, you're good. If your backstory is paragraphs long, you will probably need to do quite a bit of revision. However, putting your backstory into dialogue is a great hack. We're going to learn more about this with C.L. Walters next week. What's great about putting backstory into dialogue is you can get to know another character and how they see things, and it keeps the story moving because then you have action beats. So like you don't just have the character like, all right, tell me about this person's life. Instead, it's like this other person is maybe making a cup of coffee and they're sitting down, and like there's a whole another vibe that's surrounding the story. Okay. And then you may have to get rid of paragraphs of information that only you will know. So this is what Kim had to do, right, with her story. But you also have to trust the reader that they will understand why the character is the way they are based on what you said in your automatic thoughts. So the thoughts that came after the trigger. All right. It's quite a bit of information. Is there anything that comes to mind or that you guys have questions or thoughts? Was that helpful? Okay. Excellent. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to maybe ask, let's have, who do I want? Who do I want to know? Maria Elena, I haven't seen you in so long. What is your goal for today's prickle?
Well, based off of the prompt, and this is something I've been thinking about, is I haven't done really any development about like my character's like family and like why she has these like insecurities.
Ooh.
And so it kind of sort of made me think that I want to write a scene where she's on the phone with her, like, I think probably her dad. I haven't decided, like, or maybe both her parents or whatever. That like, like, what is she always doing this for? Why is she like so determined to break through and like make a name for herself? Is it really for her, or is it for, you know, to prove something to?
It's just one type of prickle. Sometimes we have a closed door prickle where we talk about our work, or we have a webinar where an expert speaker comes in, or we have a workshop where we get to apply exactly what we learned directly into our work in progress. It's really important to us at Quill Cup that we sharpen our quill with knowledge of craft. Admit that there are things that we don't know and we need to learn how to do better. And then we also acknowledge the importance of filling our cup. And so sometimes we'll have a workshop that is for mindset, because if we are self-sabotaging ourselves, then how can we show up to the page? If this prickle and those kinds of prickles are exactly what you need in your writing journey, come join us, sister. Visit www.quillandcup.com. Click join today. We cannot wait to get to know you and your story and support you on your journey. See you soon.